Plastic is everywhere. It chokes rivers, burns in the air, and lingers in the soil for centuries. For most of the world, this is a curse without remedy. But in the heart of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré dares to see something else. Not waste, but seeds of possibility. Imagine a land where millions live without safe shelter, where children crouch under trees to study, where electricity remains a dream for entire villages. Now imagine the very poison that destroys their soil becoming the bricks that raise homes, the fuel that powers clinics, the foundation of a new dignity. This is not charity, it is sovereignty. This is not pity, it is pride. From bottles to bricks, from trash to energy, a revolution is stirring on the dusty banks of Ouagadougou. Stay with us. This is more than a story of plastic. It is a story of sovereignty. Subscribe and walk with us. Because what follows may change the way you see not only waste, but the destiny of Africa itself. In Ouagadougou, after every market day, mountains of discarded bottles rise like monuments to despair. Streams in the countryside are clogged with plastic, their surfaces shimmering not with fish, but with fragments of decay. Farmers complain of poisoned soil where fibers of plastic refuse to decompose. And yet amid this landscape of waste, a single question takes root. What if these bottles could build a future? Ibrahim Traoré's answer was radical in its simplicity. He and his team began to collect bottles by the million, from rivers, streets, and dumps. Each was washed, dried, and tightly packed with sand or soil. What emerged was an eco-brick, a bottle so dense and compact that it rivaled the strength of a conventional block of cement. When bound with mortar, walls of these bricks proved not only resilient, but astonishingly affordable. The first demonstration house stood on the edge of a village, modest yet monumental in its message. 2 rooms raised from roughly 20,000 bottles. Children touched its walls in disbelief. Mothers stepped through the doorway with relief, whispering that for the first time, rain would not invade their sleep. Fathers spoke with pride. We built this with our own hands, with bottles the world abandoned. The symbolism was unmistakable. A material once cursed had become a vessel of dignity. Where the world saw only rubbish, Burkina Faso families saw foundations for survival. Each bottle lifted from the dirt became a grain of sovereignty, each wall a proclamation that poverty was not destiny, but circumstance, and circumstances could be changed. From houses, the vision expanded to schools. For too long, children studied beneath trees, their lessons broken by storms and heat. Now classrooms built of eco-bricks rose from the soil, sturdy enough to withstand both wind and time. Inside, sunlight filtered gently through plastered walls, offering shade and silence for learning. To the children, it was more than architecture. It was the first roof under which education could breathe freely. The walls carried an unspoken message. What had once been dismissed as decay could hold the weight of dignity. In these classrooms, pencils wrote not just words, but the beginnings of a national rebirth. Health workers, too, began to notice the transformation. Clinics built from plastic bottles were cooler, their walls thick enough to resist heat. In waiting rooms, families sat with quiet astonishment, marveling that what had once poisoned their rivers was now sheltering their sick. For nurses who had treated patients under leaking roofs, these bottle clinics were not only a structure, but a salvation. And yet, even as walls were raised, a deeper question lingered. Could bottles alone sustain a nation's march to dignity? Plastic had become the foundation, but could it also become the light? The transformation reached its peak, not in theory, but in the laughter of children. One morning, pupils entered a classroom built entirely of bottles. They ran their fingers over the smooth plaster that hid the eco-bricks beneath, then pressed their palms against the walls as if testing the truth of a miracle. For the first time, they were no longer scattered under trees, fearing the rain or the wind. They sat beneath a roof that declared education was no longer a privilege, but a right. The emotional crest spread further when electricity arrived. Through the process of pyrolysis, Ibrahim's team turned plastic into liquid fuel, which in turn powered small village generators. The electricity was modest, a few dozen kilowatts, but in villages accustomed to darkness, it felt like a sunrise. In one rural clinic, a nurse wept as the first lamp illuminated a delivery room. She whispered, "For years I held torches in my teeth to help women give birth. Tonight I have light." This was not just technology. It was rebirth, the translation of despair into dignity. Firewood piles grew smaller, trees stood taller, and the air grew cleaner. Families breathed without the constant sting of smoke. The earth itself seemed to sigh with relief as the pressure of deforestation eased. The reaction of communities was immediate and overwhelming. Young men who had once drifted between odd jobs now stood in lines to collect bottles, to wash, to pack them with sand. Women formed cooperatives producing eco-bricks for sale. What had been considered worthless turned into an economy of survival. Songs returned to the rhythm of labor. Laughter returned to the villages. In every new building, people saw not just a structure, but solidarity. As the movement grew, the words of Ibrahim himself captured its spirit. Addressing a crowd in a newly built school, his voice was both humble and fiery. These bottles are not garbage. They are our future. With our hands, we will build not only homes and schools, but dignity. Our young people will not hold guns. They will hold bricks. They will not destroy, nor they will create. The applause erupted, but beneath the sound lay something deeper. A shared belief that the future of Burkina Faso could indeed be different. Soon, the media amplified the story. Local newspapers hailed the green revolution of plastic. Radio broadcasts carried the voices of villagers who spoke of living in a new era. On social media, images of colorful bottle houses spread rapidly. Young Burkinabe began to call themselves pioneers, not victims. But the echoes did not stop at home. In Ouagadougou, politicians took note. Some celebrated the initiative as a symbol of sovereignty, proof that Burkina Faso could craft its own destiny without waiting for foreign aid. Others, uneasy with the shift, worried about what it meant for entrenched systems of power. And beyond the borders, a larger stage awaited. Journalists, NGOs, and international institutions began to turn their gaze toward this unlikely revolution of waste. The applause within a school hall was about to echo through the corridors of global politics. The first consequence was shelter. Families who had lived for generations under fragile huts of straw or tin now stepped into homes that could withstand both rain and heat. For them, it was not merely comfort, it was survival. In a country where millions were officially classified as lacking adequate housing, these walls of plastic were more than structures. They were the difference between despair and dignity. Jobs followed swiftly. Each house required thousands of bottles, collected, washed, packed, stacked. Dozens of workers found employment in every step. Young men who had once stood idle at street corners now returned home with steady wages. Women joined cooperatives, producing eco-bricks in bulk, transforming what had been unpaid labor into livelihoods. Even elders remarked that their sons, once tempted by migration or militias, were now builders of a nation instead of fugitives from it. The health of communities improved as well. Piles of open waste no longer festered in villages, reducing the breeding grounds for mosquitoes. With less burning of plastic, respiratory diseases declined. Biofuel generators reduced the dependence on firewood, slowing deforestation and allowing the land to breathe again. Farmers noticed soil retaining more moisture, rains returning with more consistency. What began as construction became restoration, not only of homes, but of the earth itself. Yet the most striking transformation was psychological. For decades, Burkinabe citizens were told they had nothing. No resources, no wealth, no chance. Today, each bottle pulled from a river and placed into a wall proved the opposite. The poor, long dismissed as passive recipients of aid, began to see themselves as architects of their own destiny. The act of building became an act of sovereignty. Politically, the initiative was explosive. Burkina Faso had often been framed internationally as dependent on donors and handouts. But now villagers were solving their own problems with their own waste. This was sovereignty in practice, dignity made visible in bricks and mortar. Politicians who embraced the movement framed it as national pride, a rebuke to dependency, a proof that the nation could rise from within. Others, however, saw in it a challenge. Traditional construction companies relying on cement imports whispered about threats to their markets. Bureaucrats stalled progress with permits and regulations. Elites worried that a people able to build without permission might soon demand to govern without permission. Whispers grew louder when comparisons arose between the transformation of waste and the transformation of power. Just as Ibrahim Traoré had taken plastic and reshaped it into homes, he had also taken the state and reshaped it into a new order. To many, the plastic revolution became the social counterpart of the Ibrahim Traoré coup. Both born of frustration with dependency, both declarations of self-rule, both rooted in the hands of the people. And so the bottle walls became not only shelters, but symbols of dignity, of sovereignty, of a revolution that stretched from the classroom to the corridors of power. But symbols are never neutral. The applause of villagers was beginning to draw the eyes of the world. And with that gaze came the weight of politics far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. What began as a local experiment did not stay hidden for long. Soon, international institutions, governments, and media outlets were compelled to take notice. What the villagers of Burkina Faso saw as survival, the world began to frame as innovation. The United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, sent delegates to Ouagadougou. Their report described the bottle houses as a unique pilot of circular economy in West Africa, recommending neighboring Sahel states to study the model. This was recognition at the highest level. Plastic bottles once seen as poison were now classified as tools of development. The African Union, AU, celebrated the project as a Made in Africa solution. For them, it was more than an environmental success. It was sovereignty expressed not through speeches or treaties, but through the daily labor of communities, reclaiming control over their resources. Europe, too, responded. The European Union saw opportunities to connect the initiative with its Green Climate Fund. Germany and the Netherlands dispatched engineers to test the durability of the bottle bricks, assessing whether they could be scaled up. European diplomats framed the effort as grassroots climate action, the kind of narrative they wished to showcase on global stages. From Washington came mixed signals. Through the Young African Leaders Initiative, the United States praised Ibrahim Traoré as a symbol of youth innovation and resilience. Universities such as MIT and Stanford expressed interest in collaborative research on recycling technologies. Yet the oil companies of Houston and New York viewed the rise of plastic biofuel with unease. If poor nations could transform their waste into energy, would they still need imported fossil fuels? The global media amplified the story with enthusiasm. BBC, Al Jazeera, and France 24 aired documentaries, while National Geographic devoted an entire feature to the bottle houses, calling them icons of hope in the heart of the Sahel. Overnight, Burkina Faso, often invisible on the world stage, became a laboratory of possibility. But visibility carried its own complexities. Supporters hailed it as the dawn of a Burkina Faso revolution in environmental thinking, a turning point where Africa no longer waited for aid but wrote its own script. Critics, however, cautioned that independence carried risks. Would donors feel alienated? Would global powers interpret this sovereignty as defiance rather than progress? The answer was still unfolding. Burkina Faso had placed itself firmly on the international map, but whether the world would embrace or resist this revolution remained an open question. Every revolution carries both promise and peril, and Ibrahim Traoré's vision is no exception. The path ahead for Burkina Faso is paved with opportunity, yet strewn with obstacles that will test the resilience of its people. The first challenge is scale. Collecting millions of bottles from remote villages requires infrastructure: trucks, storage depots, organized recycling hubs. Roads remain poor, transport is slow, and without investment, the supply chain depends almost entirely on volunteers. To grow beyond demonstration projects, the movement must professionalize its logistics. Quality and safety raise further questions. Bottle houses have proven strong, but widespread adoption demands formal certification. Fire resistance, long-term durability, and structural codes must be tested and enforced. Without such standards, critics may dismiss the houses as temporary shelters rather than permanent homes. Financing looms as a constant hurdle. Thus far, Ibrahim's team has relied on donations, small grants, and local labor. To power entire districts with biofuel, partnerships with banks and international funds will be necessary. Yet with money comes influence, and the greatest fear is that outside investors may dilute the independence that gave the project its soul. And yet, alongside the risks, the opportunities shine brightly. Neighboring states such as Mali and Niger have already expressed interest in learning from Burkina Faso's model. If expanded, the nation could export not just the method, but its expertise, becoming a regional hub for waste-to-energy solutions. Tourism, too, is emerging. Eco-villages lined with colorful bottle walls attract journalists, researchers, and curious travelers. What was once decay now brings foreign exchange. Most profoundly, the psychology of a generation has shifted. Young Burkinabe no longer define themselves as victims of scarcity, but as creators of possibility. They identify not with dependency, but with dignity. That change of mindset is the seed of resilience. And so, the road ahead stretches into uncertainty, but also into hope. If one small landlocked country can transform rubbish into light, if bottles once cursed can become foundations of sovereignty, then what truly limits the future? The answer waits in the hands of those still collecting bottles on riverbanks, in the laughter of children studying in bottle-built classrooms, and in the determination of a people who have chosen creation over despair. The story of Ibrahim Traoré is not only about plastic. It is about rewriting the fate of a nation once dismissed as powerless. Where the world saw only rubbish, he saw foundation stones. Where others treated decay as destiny, he transformed it into light, shelter, and education. In Burkina Faso today, families step into homes made of 20,000 bottles and feel secure. Children raise their heads in sturdy classrooms, no longer chased away by storms. Clinics hum with electricity, powered by fuel distilled from waste. Forests breathe as firewood consumption falls, while young men and women earn livelihoods through creation instead of destruction. Each eco-brick carries the message that dignity can be built with bare hands. The world has begun to take notice. Some hail it as innovation, others question its defiance. But within Burkina Faso, the meaning is clear. This is sovereignty in action. It is a declaration that development need not wait for donors. It can rise from the soil, from the rivers, from the very waste the world abandoned. Comparisons abound. Just as the Ibrahim Traoré coup shook the political foundations of the state, so too does this plastic revolution reshape its social destiny. Both were born of frustration with dependency. Both declared, "We will not wait, we will build." And in that echo lies the true spirit of a Burkina Faso revolution. The question now belongs not only to Burkina Faso, but to the world. If bottles can become bricks, if rubbish can power hospitals, if what was once poison can become pride, then what else might be possible? Do not look away. Share this story. Subscribe and keep walking with us, for the revolution of dignity has only just begun, and its next chapter may be written in your own hands.